Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Unvarnished Football, or should I say bonjour, as the NFL scheduling a game in Paris. I'm Michael Jackson of the Game Before the Money. With me, as always, former NFL executive Upton Bell. And we want to add that Upton's got a collection at the University of Massachusetts Amherst that you can check out, artifacts such as his Super Bowl ring with the Baltimore Colts for Super Bowl V, among many other um, exciting pieces of memorabilia of pro football history and even some baseball history with Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. We're going to get started and talk about the NFL. Kind of expanding, um, perhaps expanding the schedule, and definitely expanding their international reach. Now, Roger Goodell quoted this week or recently as saying that they want to branch out globally, and eventually they have a plan that there'll be 16 international games each year. That means each team is going to play a game outside of the United States. Upton, what are you seeing here, and what are your thoughts when you hear Goodell talk like that?
Michael, I'm not surprised because my information is that they need to continue to grow the product, and the only place outside the United States is Europe. I think eventually they'll be going to China. They're going to South America, and the reason is there are many reasons, and there's nothing wrong with trying to expose your game everywhere, particularly the game of football, which is now second only to soccer, I think, in the world as far as popularity, particularly in the United States. But what they have, their research will tell you, and it's something that I felt for a long time, that they really, the product is so grown in this country that there is nowhere else to go as far as the product is concerned. I mean, we started out, as you pointed out, and we'll get into later, started out at like 10, 12, 14, 16 games. Now we're at 17. They want to go to an 18th game, which I think is way too much. But where are you going to take this? Not only that, we're going to look into later on, as you point out, to the role of television, over the air TV versus streaming, and what it all means. So you've got to feed the beast, and the way to feed the beast is to go everywhere outside of this country, because the beast has already been fed in this country. So I see it as two things. One, yes, growing the game is good. Growing it worldwide is good. But I also say that how much more can you do in this country? I mean, they're bringing up again. Maybe it's a trial balloon, but I believe it's going to happen. But not only do we get Thanksgiving Day, not only do we get Christmas Day. I mean, are we going to have it when the resurrection comes? I mean, now they're talking about the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and they'll probably sell that to a streaming service. So how much is too much? And how can you then get Europe involved? I think it's a very good idea, because as far as growing the NFL in this country, to me they're tapped out. In fact, it was funny because when the time comes, we'll hook up with a friend of mine in Paris, France, who's talking about the game there. So it on one hand, it's very important to continue to grow the game, but number two, it's about growing as much as it can in this country.
Well, and there's a story of Goodell getting getting an email, showing him that 98 of the top 100 rated programs of a year on television were NFL games. And a lot of times you look at the list of the most watched television programs each and every year, the NFL owns it. Um, so yeah, it's like you can't get any bigger. But for the fans, you know, where does this leave us? You know, um, because
Screwed.
exactly, because how many subscriptions do we have to buy to watch our team play? Now, I had Sunday Ticket, okay, this year, okay, and I know
Hmm.
you get Red Zone, um,
Yep.
and okay, and we still don't have all the games for our teams, right? Because the international games are played on another. I don't have Peacock. We don't have Peacock because we've got four other subscriptions. Okay, so we miss the games on Peacock um, at our household. Maybe some people don't have Paramount. Maybe some people don't have Netflix. Maybe some people don't have Prime. Okay, you got to have all of those plus Sunday Ticket.
Yep.
You know, so but then you think back to the days. Now when I was growing up, you know, I got 3 games, 4 games a week if you count Monday Night Football. All right, you had the 2 games on Sunday. You had your AFC and NFC matchup. You had the AFC on NBC. You had the NFC on CBS, right? And then you'd have the late game. Well, where I grew up, you'd have the late game. You'd have 2 games at noon, and you'd have a game at 3. And generally, that was the Cowboys, really. so,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, we've got, and then we'd have Monday Night Football, okay, and that was it. That was it. That was all we could have. Now we have almost a limitless um, availability. So there is that offset, but there is quite a bit of a price to the individual watching these games.
Well, that's the biggest problem. Now I have two, soon to be three television sets with big screens. So, and I will say this: that the NFL, television wise, has done a much better job of where now I can see the whole field, and I could probably, without knowing what the team is going to do, look at a defense the way it's set up on a wide screen, which I could never see before, and see the secondary and how they're set up, and pretty much tell you what I think they're going to call on every play. And by the way, that gimmick will come into the NFL eventually too, where we can all press our button and say this is what the play is going to be. But the individual costs now. I have the red zone. I have I don't have Peacock, although I occasionally will get it, but I have Amazon. I have all of these different outlets, and I keep saying to myself, well, you're starting now to pay for something that you got for free. And I think that's going to go along to the point of someday you'll have to pay to watch the Super Bowl, maybe $25, $50 a household. But that's not as far in the future as you think it is. So one of the other things you have to always be careful of, and my father always talked about this, because again, we've talked about many times he's been the originator of a lot of things in the NFL. A lot of people don't know that I think it was 1937 that Bert Bell's Philadelphia Eagles were playing the Brooklyn Dodgers. Yes, they had a football team in those days, and it was the first televised game in NFL history, and it was televised in New York by NBC. And you can get, I think, part of that original broadcast. And what my father saw, which he later instituted as commissioner, was that television was the perfect game for football. Stop and start, timeouts. He even put in the 2 minute warning. That had nothing to do with the 2 minute warning. so he could sell more advertising. He was the first one to sell a national television product, Saturday Night Football in the NFL in the 50s, and would have continued on and not been Monday nights, but Saturday nights until the colleges complained and he agreed to back off of that. But what he saw was that football was the perfect game for television. A pause after each play, timeouts. The violence, of course, itself was in the game itself. And so, what was the first great nationally televised game? And it was the 1958 Sudden Death Championship game that turned all of America on to what had been a baseball-dominated game into the NFL, and from then on in, it's all been uphill. But the final part of this piece, Michael, is what I see, and maybe it's because I'm looking at it in a very critical eye. But when I watch all the games on the red zone, it just reminds me of how many bad football teams out of 32, I would tell you at least 10, maybe more, are really bad football teams. And the one thing is you don't want to expose your product unless you think you've got it totally made for people to begin to see how bad these teams are. So that's the only downside that I see here.
Yeah, that's right. And we were texting back and forth recently, and you brought up the fact, like, okay, they're talking about parity, and they keep calling it parity, but is it parity or is it mediocrity?
It's mediocrity.
Yeah, I agree. And then we've got a situation where they want to increase the number of games. So they've already increased it. I'm going to give everybody a little brief history here of NFL schedules and games, just quickly. Up till 1945. 1945 was the last season that they had 10 games. In 1946, they went to 11 games, and that was your dad's first year as an NFL commissioner. And then
Right.
correct, yep. 1947, and actually 1946. Let's kind of add a little bit of background into that. That's when the AAFC started. That was a new pro football league to rival the NFL. The AAFC started in 1946, and the NFL went to 12 or 11 games rather in 1946, then 12 games in 1947. And it stayed 12 games for quite a few years. The AFL, the American Football League, started in 1960, and the AFL put out a 14-game schedule. Okay, and the NFL still had a 12-game schedule
Right.
in 1960, right. And it was in 1961 that the NFL then went to 14 games. Now, was that to copy the AFL? Do you remember, or was that just coincidental? Had they planned to have a 12-game schedule? Do you remember?
Well, I think it too. That remember that they added new teams too in the '60s. They added the Vikings. I know definitely because when Norm Van Brocklin won the championship in 1960, he then was named coach of the Minnesota Vikings.
That's right.
So
yeah, Vikings and Cowboys get added right around that time.
They get added, and actually, the first game, and my father died in October of '59. In 1960, my first training camp was with the Baltimore Colts while I was still in college, and our opening game, preseason game, then was against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, and so you had the Vikings and you had Dallas, and then they went to 14 games. I don't think it was because the AFL had gone to that. But I do want to take you back to something that happened and somewhere along the line we'll get into the war years. But in 1944, when the we were fighting in Europe, and everybody was concerned about Germany and then Japan and Italy to a degree. The owners had decided pretty much that they wanted to suspend operations during the war. And my father got up at the meeting. He was a part owner of he was the owner of the Eagles at that time. He later became the part owner of the Steelers. But basically, he warned them. He said, there is another football league coming into existence called the old All-America Conference. And he said, if we close down, we will never open up again. And he said, not only that, if we open up, we are going to face full-time competition by the All-America Football Conference. And only by one vote did he get them to not close down during World War II, because, again, with many of the things that really faced the NFL, particularly during that period, luckily Bert Bell was the right man for it, because every time they wanted to do something that he thought would really hurt the league, that he stopped it. And if not, you might have been talking about Otto Graham today. I mean, we're talking about him anyway. But that league, was really a danger to the NFL. And in fact, if the Cleveland Browns hadn't dominated that league so much and gone to 10 straight championships from 46 through 56, who knows what would have happened. But again, in looking back at all the history, there are many times that the NFL could go under and probably should have gone under. And that's why today I want to warn, again, in our radio show, that basically be careful what you wish for. Because right now, yes, 80%, 90% of the people who watch sports are watching the NFL. That doesn't guarantee they will be forever. Because one thing you know about the American public, when they get tired of something, they dump it. So I think it's very smart by Goodell and whatever way he's pushing the owners to begin to really look at Europe. And I would be looking at South America. I know they've been there. I'd be looking at China. I'd be looking anywhere to go, because in this country, you've just about done it. And you can't grow the product by constantly bombarding them in this country, because all you're going to do is keep adding more and more games, and people are finally going to say, you know what? It's like the NCAA, Michael, and I know I'm jumping off another subject. I used to watch the NCAA playoffs, March Madness, all the time. You know what now? I don't give a damn about it one way or another.
Well, I still love my March Madness, but I will say this, okay? The NFL, when I first started watching the NFL, there was a 14-game season. And that started, like we had said, in 1961. In 1978, they went to 16 games. Now, I think it's important also to point out in 77 and even in the 60s, they had 6 preseason games.
Right.
Preseason games were a big deal back then, and they were especially important for raising money for charities. A lot of times, at least one or two of the preseason games would be to raise money for a charity, a children's hospital, something like that. But they reduce the number of preseason games. They add onto the number of regular season games. Now, what that means in terms of players, it takes a lot more out of them, because the regular season games are brutal compared to the preseason games. But now us as fans, you know, I mean, it's becoming a full time job. Having to keep up with the Thursday night game, uh, the Sunday games, the Sunday morning games. I mean, look, I still don't get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to watch the NFL. And in fact, I don't even have the NFL Network to do that. So,
Well,
um,
no, let me just add. Most of the games are crappy games. They're not your best teams. Now we'll see if that changes.
well, and like Goodell said, he wants to have a game every team play a game internationally. That's the goal. 16. 16 games. That's 16 out of 17 weeks and hypothetically 18 weeks. Now, Goodell is saying that's not a done deal, the 18 games, but, you know, we, I think it's in the general public, it's seen as almost inevitable. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's becoming a lot more of a slog to to watch,
Oh yeah.
especially the regular season. And the thing is when I first started watching it, and I'm not, and again, everybody, Upton and I, we love the game, okay, and we're gonna watch the NFL, no matter what, okay, we're lifers. And we're not saying like, oh, let's go back to the old days, we're,
No,
we're,
right.
we're not saying that. But, when I started watching football, the Super Bowl was played in mid January. Okay. And then, you took a break. You took a break, you reset, and you had time between March Madness and Major League Baseball starting. Now, I mean, the NFL has consumed, saturated the news, even when we're months out before a game is played. And they drag the season into now the second week of February. And look out, guys, I'm giving you a tip right now to start thinking about a strategy because next year the Super Bowl is on Valentine's Day. Okay?
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now that's going to get some of us in trouble. Okay? Because because start coming up with explanations now or start coming up with a strategy now as to how to balance your Valentine's Day with the Super Bowl because that's going to be a juggling act for some of us
Well,
fans.
you know what they want eventually. I expect it to be on Easter Sunday pretty soon. But what they want is they want it to become a national holiday. Watch out for somewhere in the future that the Super Bowl will be played on a Monday as part of the NFL national holiday. Believe me, a lot of the things that I predicted growing up, I saw happen. And back to the preseason games. You played 6 games, but the players hardly played in those games. They through scrimmages and stuff, they worked themselves into shape. I mean, you would see even with the 6 preseason games, and by the way, they're called exhibition games until my father told each one of the owners, you tell your broadcasters they are preseason games, not exhibition games, because we're trying to sell a product. And if we say it's exhibition games, then we're not going to be able to charge the price on it. But the whole idea then was that even with all the modern conveniences and everything that we have today, I mean, players now have trainers, personal trainers, dietitians, stretch artists. I mean, I said to myself, for Christ's sake, when will this end? But you played yourself into shape, and then during the regular season, you were ready for it. They limit practices now. They limit hitting. And why are they doing all of these things? Because I'll tell you why. These players are bigger, stronger, quicker, faster, but they're too finely tuned. They're too well, put together. And what has happened is now, I mean, you could go almost a full season without any real serious injuries. Look at the injury list. I mean, I feel like it's a civil war. What happened in Antietam? How many people were killed today? I mean, you look at how many players are finished halfway through the season. That never happened. Now, yes, you can say players bigger, stronger, quicker, faster, more intelligent, but you're now approaching 400-pound linemen. Well, what the hell do you expect? But the things that are happening. So all of these, to me, are you can't fly blind, and you got to begin to look at a lot of these things. Do you play Sunday? Do you play Monday? Do you then play on Sunday and come back on a Thursday? I can tell you, even going all the way back to when football was in the dark ages, let's say in the 60s, when I would ask our players, I say, how long does it take you to recover? This is when they weren't 400 pounds. How long does it take you to recover when you play on a Sunday? Most of them would say, if lucky, by Saturday. So now look at what's happening. You're playing Sunday, and then you're playing Thursday. Why did so many teams, why did the Packers eventually want to get out of the Thanksgiving Day game against the Lions, which was, written in stone? Because Lombardi said, I don't want, our players can't play on Sunday and again on Thursday. But they are now, and then they're talking about adding another game, and you're saying to yourself, at what price does this all happen?
Right, and later in the season, players' bodies are debilitated,
Gone.
and then they're adding extra games, a 17th game, and then an 18th game potentially. Um, I'm
Michael,
starting to. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
no, not only that, remember, you're playing international games. You get on a plane and you fly, let's say, to Brazil, where they had the opening Eagles, I think, Packers game. That's 12 hours one way. You got big bodies sitting on a plane, even if they get up and walk around and flying at that height, and they're going for 12 hours. I mean, the average flight is 6 or 7 hours at least to go to, whether it's London or Paris or Madrid or Germany. You got big bodies on a plane going back and forth and then getting acclimated to the new environment. You got to be kidding. The last people that are being considered, and I point my finger directly at the Players Association for putting up with this bullshit. They've got to learn to say no somewhere along the line, or they're going to find themselves. The average life of a player, it was 3.5 years in 1946. It's almost the same today. The average life of a player is going to be 2 years.
Well, and also we haven't even talked about the time change either. And you're playing one week, you're playing. Let's say you're the Giants. Let's just say we play for the Giants. Okay, we're on
Yep.
East Coast time. Okay, we're used to East Coast time. All right, maybe our Sunday game is in Los Angeles or even in Denver. Holy cow! You play on the road in Denver, and then your next week game is in Germany. I mean, you talk about the altitude change. You talk about the time change. You talk about the fluctuation, and then you're supposed to play in an NFL game. I mean, that's a lot of havoc on the body, on the mind. Um, and I know Raymond Berry Hall of Fame wide receiver for the Colts, he told me that he would start he'd start going to bed early, if
Yes.
they were playing a West Coast game, and you probably remember this, right? Right? Raymond Berry
I
was on
do.
teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He'd start going to bed. He'd set his clock for the West Coast time if they were playing a West Coast game that Sunday. Now, what would he be doing if they were playing in London? You
Oh,
know?
he'd be in bed for 2 days, and knowing Raymond, and I knew him very well, and there's no question. But I think again, because it's so expensive to buy into an NFL franchise. In fact, we're seeing that NFL franchises owners that have been around forever, whether it's the Giants or here at the Patriots, they're beginning to sell off pieces of their team. Not that they won't control it, because they need, with all the millions of dollars they're making, that they want to get more money, more investment in their teams. And I'm saying to myself, when will it all end? But the big difference, and you can say it's part of progress, and I understand, uh, the difference between the old time owner, and I'm not talking about the 40s or 50s, I'm talking about owners, whether it was Lamar Hunt in the 60s and the 70s. Oh, even people like Jerry Jones are still around now, have to realize that the people that can afford to buy these teams are billionaires. How many of those billionaires really understand what the sport is all about? Are they looking for the best television deal, how to grow the game, all the things? Uh, or are they beginning to understand you can't play every night of the week, which someday maybe we'll see? That's the difference. The people who used to be the owners, good and bad, were people that split between how much money can we make and what is good for the game. And I think you're losing that, uh, even though I'm sure many people don't agree with my position. But I can just tell you, looking at it, because I was a general manager, I was a personnel director, I understood the operation then, and I perfectly understand it now. In fact, with the local team, I'm in some ways, I think, one step ahead of them about what moves they're going to make. But where my mind is how do you keep the game fresh? What do you do to protect the game? What I'm seeing now is how do you sell the game in any shape or form, and don't worry about the Thursdays and flying overseas. That is not taken into consideration no matter what they say.
All right, all right, and they say player safety, um,
Oh, come
but
on.
all of this puts the players at risk. There's no question that the more games you add, the more injuries there are going to be, and then um, when you add elements such as time changes, breaking a routine. And I think this is important because I've talked to players about this. And players, NFL players especially, are very routine based. And when you talk to players about Thursday night games, they're like, oh my gosh, even a Monday night game will shake their routine up to the point where it's really troubling. And a Thursday night game that really breaks it up, their routine. And then if you have to travel internationally, well, that's that's going to break up the routine tremendously. And how good are those games going to be? You know, with all the travel and with all the breakup in routine as far as practicing, working out, as far as diet. I mean, what kind of foods are available in Europe, in Asia, in South America? They're going to have to adapt their diet. I know um, a player who played in the NFL, who played a college game in Japan. He said they got over there, and they need a lot of protein, and all they could find was sushi.
Well, yeah, rice.
And
But
little strips of meat and rice, and it was a very difficult adjustment.
but here is the bottom line: we are sending out all the warning signals, and you know what? I think the general public, and particularly owners, they don't give a shit. I mean that the game just keeps selling itself. That's all that they can say. Basically, I hear everything that you two guys are saying, and guess what? 80 to 90% of the people in this country love it. What they love is the violence. It is a contact sport. It's one of the few outside of hockey, and hockey doesn't even have the serious injuries that football does. But the life of a football player, God bless them. Make all the money you can now, boys, because I can tell you that you're going to spend the rest of your life being injured in some way or not. But your career, for the money that you're making, the $70 million quarterback, the ones that are good enough to get that, let's see how long your career is. Patrick Mahomes, does anybody expect him to have his knee ravaged? And we'll see how quickly he returns, by the way. So there is another side to this that is unglamorous and not good, in my opinion, for the game.
And in the book, The Game Before the Money, um, you can read about very well-known players sharing their stories about injuries that they have decades after playing pro football. And of course, the famous, or maybe not so famous to me, I remember the shock of reading it to this day. Sports Illustrated with Johnny Unitas on the cover.
Oh
Play now, pay later. And Johnny Unitas, to a lot of us, to generations of football fans, he defines what a man is in a lot of ways. And, that article said that Johnny Unitas really, he had trouble combing his own hair.
Yeah.
When he was older. That's what was reported in that, because of an elbow injury he got in 1960. And that article came out in either the late 90s, that's 30 some years later, almost 40 years after that injury. And I know players that need to go get cortisone shots for their injuries every few months. I know of at least one Hall of Famer whose wife continues working simply so they can have health insurance to cover his medical costs. And that's another issue that players face later in their careers or later in their lives, is their medical costs. And I've had players tell me that their medical costs have been more than what they made their entire NFL career.
Well, you have John Mackey, who had Alzheimer's disease and didn't know who the hell he was. And his wife, who I knew, his wife had to fly. She became a flight attendant and had to keep her job. As great as he was, Hall of Famer, had to supply enough money for them to exist. I mean, that John Unitas was a total cripple, and in the end died of a heart attack while trying to work out to deal something. His hands. I mean, I saw what I consider. I think the Unitas and Brady, and there are 4 or 5 other ones that I consider the greatest quarterbacks of all time. and what he did for the game in the end. Do you know this? That when he applied for all of the injuries he had for for his pension, whatever it was, the NFL turned him down. That did, this is among a handful of greatest players of all time, and he couldn't get the help necessary in the end, and died of a heart attack while trying to work out at a place outside of Baltimore. A friend of mine that ran the place. I mean, they're the tragedies that people don't see. They just see the glamour and they see what it is. But as you point out, when this is all over, and it's a brief career, that yeah, basically, a Tom Brady can afford to get as many facelifts as he wants. But for every Tom Brady, there's a lot of guys that can't afford anything.
That play the
So,
3.5 year average NFL career.
and gone, then gone.
That's true. And now they're looking to ask more of the players with the 18 games, with the international games, and we have to and we have to ask ourselves as fans, is this better for us? Is it better for the game? Is it better for the players? None of us, pay to see an owner.
Oh my
Flat
God!
out,
Then
flat
you
out,
can't get rid of them now.
flat
Every owner has to be introduced. I said, is this Broadway? Is this no business like show business? I mean, there's always the excuse. Look at Bob Kraft open his box, or Jerry Jones' machinations, or there's John Mara. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's why they buy the teams. I mean, you got to have somebody that are willing to buy them, and part of the package is, oh, do you see? So, oh, there's Condoleezza Rice up in the Denver owner box, But that's what it is, and again, we are not preaching against it. All we are saying is, buyer beware. This is what's going to go on.
Well,
Enjoy the game, but that's it.
yeah, and I think it's important for us as fans to know going into the next few years, we're going to have to pay more and more to watch the NFL. And they're going to go, they're likely going to go to an 18-game season, but they're certainly going to go to these international games. That is the full-on plan. That Roger Goodell was talking about. And they're renegotiating already with CBS, and the reports are they may get a billion more dollars out of a CBS deal that wasn't going to expire for another 2-3 years in the NFL. Like Darth Vader, I'm changing the terms of the deal.
Well,
They want to renegotiate it, and
well, they can go to them and say, because they're willing people at let's say Netflix, which is a multi-billion-dollar outfit, they can go to the networks and say, if you don't put up the money, we've already got a deal for billions of dollars from Netflix or Amazon. I mean, two places that have deep pockets they can go to. So what they're going to do is they're going to dangle before Fox and CBS and even Sunday Night Football. We've forgotten that. And they're going to say, if you don't re-up now, we're going to go to the highest bidder. And they certainly will. And that will mean that they'll all put up billions of dollars for our enjoyment, whatever that is.
all right. Well, Upton, as always, another great chat about where we are with the NFL now, and we're gonna get together next week. We're gonna talk about some coaching changes that have happened in the NFL. We might even look into some player signings that happened since we
Absolutely.
went over free agency, and we'll look at the evolving role of the general manager. We plan to do that next
Well,
week also.
not only that. We just touched on it briefly. How the Baltimore Ravens were able to screw the team that Tom Brady now represents, the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, I love some of these stories. They get better every year. But anyway, yeah, that's great, Michael.
All right, be sure to check out thegamebeforethemoney.com. Be sure to check out uptonbell.com and make sure that you search for the Upton Bell collection online. That's at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. There are a lot of things online, a lot of great memorabilia items that you can see online as well. And until next week, thanks for listening and have a great week.